Welcome to Introduction to Web Accessibility. I'm Paul Richards. So the purpose of this video is to help you to understand what accessibility is in context of websites and know why accessibility is so important, as well as what the features are of an accessible website. Now, we'll also cover a very basic understanding of how accessibility can be implemented and how you can also test that a page is accessible. This is quite a useful video for students who are learning web technology. There's a lot covered in a short time, but you can pause the video at any time, and there's some references at the end which you can look up for further information. You might find it a bit heavy if you don't have a background in IT, either from your job, perhaps, or from your education. So about Paul then, I have worked in IT for over 15 years, latterly as a senior web developer. Got an academic background in computing, and I have worked in recent years instead in education as a tutor on various computing modules, programming, security, and also web technologies. All the views on my own in this video are my own, except where I've acknowledged them. So what is accessibility? Web accessibility means that websites, tools, and technologies are designed and developed so people with disabilities can use them. So we avoid excluding disabled people from websites. And because unless websites are designed with accessibility in mind, they can be difficult or impossible to use by people with certain disabilities. And there are a range of disabilities that are relevant, but the most common ones here include visual impairment, such as blindness, partial sight, color blindness, otherwise known as color vision deficiency, deafness and hearing difficulties, motor disabilities, such as people that struggle with their hands, epilepsy and seizure disorders, cognitive disabilities like dyslexia, learning difficulties, and impaired executive functioning. People with visual impairment might not be able to see the website or distinguish the parts of it from each other. Deaf people might struggle with audio content. People with motor disabilities might only be able to use the keyboard or the mouse. People with cognitive disabilities could become overloaded by too much information or confused with and discouraged by poorly designed interfaces and bad feedback. Common accessibility features include the provision of extra text. You could have alternative text for images. So instead of a picture being displayed, a blind person using a screen reader might be able to utilize the alternative text by having it read out to them. Captions for videos. Sometimes you can get just labels on things, but also more subtitle type captions, which read aloud, or which display rather as text, so that those that can't hear can utilize the video. Keyboard operability. So to be able to navigate the website without a mouse, for example, using the tab key, the alt key, page up, page down, the arrow keys, hopefully without getting stuck, confused, or frustrated by not being able to access certain parts. Clear layout, so things should be easy to understand. They should be as simple as possible. And also clear notifications and features. So when things have happened, you understand what's happened. You understand how to do things. Good color contrast. That is the difference between light and dark elements that are adjacent to each other on a page. So typically it uses a mathematical formula to quantify this. An adjustable font size, so that you can, for example, use the wheel mouse while holding down Control or Shift to zoom in and zoom out, hopefully without losing content. W3C, WAI, and WCAG. The W3C is the World Wide Web Consortium, which is a not-for-profit international organization that develops standards for technologies used on the internet like HTML and CSS. Now, standards are blueprints or building blocks used to ensure consistent quality. You get those in many areas of life, such as even in diverse things like plumbing and toy manufacturing, for example. And the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, WCAG, they're an international standard developed by the W3C. The current version is 2.2, which was published on the 5th of October 2023, but WCAG 3 is being developed, but it won't be ready for a few more years. Pardon me. Standards tend to evolve and develop as life changes, people's expectations change, technology changes. WCAG are developed as part of the WAI, the Web Accessibility Initiative, which also includes a web accessibility evaluation tool known as WAVE, which we'll discuss later. WCAG have developed accessibility principles known as POUR, P-O-U-R, which is an acronym that I will explain to you now. The POUR accessibility principles. Perceivable is about being able to perceive or see the website, experience it in a meaningful and enjoyable way. As part of this includes having text alternatives and non-text comment, such as descriptions for charts, graphs, images, etc. And captions for multimedia, so having closed captions which give you the dialogue and describe any video. Alternative presentations can be facilitated by web browsers, for example, reading things aloud, but only if the web page is structured properly through proper markup. Markup is the code behind a web page, which you typically don't see, which organizes and structures that web page. The web page should be easy to see and hear, so you need to have sufficient color contrast and ability to zoom without losing anything. Operable means that you've got to be able to do things with the website, to use it. Keyboard functionality means you can do anything with the keyboard that you can do with the mouse. Users should have the time to read and use, which means they need to be able to pause videos if necessary, halt scrolling, so we don't want automatic scrolling, which moves faster than people can understand what they are seeing. Seizures and physical reactions can be avoided by not having flashing content. If you must have flashing content, you should warn users that you're about to experience it, and because that can trigger seizures like epileptic fits in some people, and possibly allow it to be switched off. Easy navigation. Navigation is the way that you move around a website. That should be ideally, pages should have clear titles, the pages within a site. Users should know where they are, and they should also know what the links do so they know where they're going to. Input modalities other than the keyboards. That can include simple things such as easy to use buttons and an undo button, so you know what's happened. You know that there's other ways to do things, to input things. Understandable, that's about being able to comprehend, the content of the page and how to interact with it. by having readable, understandable text. If there are different languages, it should know which language they're on, whether it's the user should, whether it's English, Arabic, etc. Ideally, specialist terms should be avoided unless it's necessary, and if they are used, they should be defined and explained. Content ideally should be predictable, so that's about consistency. So, for example, the menu items are the same from one page to the next. They should do the same thing. You can help users to avoid mistakes and correct mistakes through context-sensitive help, which means that whichever page you're on offers help that is relevant to that page, and clear error messages. The robust principle is about making sure that it works properly. The ideal way of doing that is to make sure the markup, the code behind the page, works properly and is valid and can be properly interpreted so that all web browsers, past and future, are going to be able to make sense of your HTML code. Adhering to some of the standards helps that to some extent, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more later. So how do you implement an accessible website? Well, obviously we haven't got the time to give you a web design course within this short video, but just to give you a very general idea, modern websites are designed with HTML and CSS. HTML was the first language that was developed. So it defines the meaning and structure of web content. And then later on, we've got CSS to help make sure that the appearance of the web pages is consistent in an easy way. So HTML consists of elements that have tags. For example, there's a HTML element in this white box, which has the P tag, opening and closing tags within these angle brackets, and inside it you have the content of that element, which is the text that you're adding. P is short for paragraph, so it just adds a paragraph of text, and it could be text about anything. Alt text and captions. The image IMG HTML tag is used to add pictures. And here's an element here in this white rectangle. Got the image tag, so the web browser knows it's a picture. We've told it which file it is, accessibility.png. But we've also given it an alt tag with some alternative text. So a screen reader would read out that alternative text to somebody that was visually impaired and just say it's an accessibility logo. You can get much more rich descriptions than that for images, obviously. So in this example, we've got used the alt tag to give the alternative text. The screen readers, they'll describe the website in general, read the content, read the alt text. Multimedia content like videos and audio should have text to make it perceivable by everyone. Sometimes you can just, well, for a start, adding visual captions to things that are not in themselves text helps, but having like subtitles for audio material helps the deaf, is essential for the deaf to be able to utilize that experience. HTML living standard and semantic element. So HTML was invented by Tim Berners-Lee in 1990. And the first version had a very basic set of these tags. The tags are these codes like the P tag that we showed you previously in the image tag. Since then, HTML has been through different versions. Has been developed by the W3C and WhatWG, which is the Web Hypertext Application Technology Working Group. Bit of a mouthful, that. So just to reiterate, HTML consists of elements in the page, and the elements have a tag to indicate the purpose of that element. And the latest version of HTML, which might conform to the HTML living standard, includes the option to have semantic elements. A semantic element clearly describes its meaning to both the browser and the developer. So the P tag could just be text about anything. It just stands for paragraph. Whereas a track tag, it's meant to be text that is used as to accompany audio. So that track tag there, it's used to encode things and tell the browser that it's got that defined purpose, which enables tools to work with it better. Semantic elements can assist accessibility by automatically supporting keyboard operability, so you can hopefully tab through the elements on the page without getting stuck. They can provide more support by screen readers. For example, header is a semantic element. It means it goes towards the top of the site. A screen reader can quickly locate that and look for a title for the site. So for people that can't see the title, they can read it out loud. Color contrast and adjustable font size. So for those with color blindness, also known as color vision deficiency, it's important that there's color contrast. So if they can actually distinguish the different elements on the page. And the degree of color contrast can be calculated by a color contrast ratio. It's like a mathematical formula. Minimum levels for this are recommended by the WCAG. And accessibility evaluation tools such as the WAVE tool, which we'll come on to later, can calculate these ratios. So if the ratio isn't high enough, then elements that are different colors that are adjacent are not distinct enough. And that's going to cause people with color vision deficiencies an issue, understanding how to use these things, or to tell them apart, really. Just for users with other vision issues, font size should be adjustable so users can zoom in on the browser to increase the size of text, make it readable. There's various ways of doing this. There are fixed units. When you're telling in your HTML and your CSS how large you want things, you can use fixed units like pixels. The pixels are the dots that make up your screen. Instead of pixels, you can use rem, which is a relative unit. Fixed units are fixed by some set standard. Relative units are relative to the size of something else. And relative units make the font size adjustable, and they're good in general, making the whole page more responsible to different screen sizes and things. But in terms of availability, in terms of accessibility, they can promote accessibility. Clear layout, notifications, and features. So for users with cognitive and neurological impairments, such as mental health problems, learning difficulties, having a clear layout, notifications that are understandable, and clear features can make a website more accessible. So you avoid cluttered, crowded types of layouts and overloading people with confusing layouts. Also relevant to people with conditions such as dyslexia. And this relates to the perceivable, operable, and understandable principles. For example, menu items shouldn't be crowded together. They should be sufficiently far apart so you can tell them which one is which. And they should have clear descriptions to say what they do, so you know what clicking on them would achieve. So why accessibility? Everything we do in life involves some disadvantage or cost, whether in time, effort, or energy. Well, there's several reasons, but for the legal case, there are laws in many countries of the world which make web accessibility important. In the UK, we've got the Equality Act 2010. So under Section 20, organisations have a requirement to make reasonable adjustments to people with disabilities. Most of the things that we've described previously, such as having alt text, they are reasonable adjustments. Section 29 prohibits discrimination against disabled people by service providers. So you could argue that if your website is not accessible, then you are discriminating, and people do argue that. For example, in the US, we have the Americans with Disabilities Act. In 2008, a few years ago now, the retailer Target had to pay $6 million to the National Federation of the Blind because there were various accessibility issues on their site, including lack of alt text. As I said, it's various issues. It wasn't just that. So that was a costly and embarrassing mistake for them. So talking of embarrassment, making websites accessible makes it clear that your organization is socially responsible, and it reduces the risk of reputational harm if there are accusations of discrimination. Accessibility can promote innovation, inclusion, branding, and productivity. Say about 1 in 6, 16% of the world's population have a disability. So by excluding this sector, you're limiting the reach of your site. You increase the user base by making it accessible. And it can also benefit non-disabled users. Some of the things that we've described here are just such as having a clear layout and even to some extent color contrast. I mean, if the text on this page was gray, certain shades of grey, you would struggle to pick it out with the blue background. So it makes it hard for everybody. So to some extent, accessibility helps helps non-disabled people as well, and those with temporary disabilities, such as the bereaved, for example, might become overwhelmed mentally if things are not clear, or people that have had an injury and can't use the mouse particularly well. Accessibility, usability, and standards compliance. We've talked about standards before. Well, usability is a quality attribute that assesses how easy user interfaces are to use. That's a quote from a usability guru, Jakob Nielsen, I think from the Nielsen Norman Group. So usability is about improving the experience of websites for everybody. That is about making sure that people can do what they want quickly and in an enjoyable and functional way, regardless of whether they have a disability or not. So there are some concepts in common to usability and accessibility, like having an intuitive layout and simple language. Web standards, they're rules established by international standards bodies that define how the web works, and they facilitate interoperability. So you've got your web browsers like Chrome, which display the web pages, and you have standards for the HTML, and these standards don't just cover accessibility, they cover other things such as the way that the markup is structured. And if this HTML conforms, if it agrees with these standards, then hopefully the web page should look and behave consistently on any standards compliant browser, so you don't have the hassle of developing separate pages for different web browsers, which is what people used to do. The many standards relate to accessibility. For example, WCAG 2.2 stipulates minimum color contrast ratios. And again, these can be tested with the evaluation tools, as we'll explain later. So if you adhere to standards, because some of them cover accessibility, then you quite often can make the website more accessible. But accessibility is about more than just standards and vice versa. The three concepts are different but related. So once you've made your website accessible, or if you're starting to use a website that somebody else has written, how would you be able to quantify how accessible it is? You could use an accessibility evaluation tool such as the WAVE tool. There are some evaluation tools that are specific to certain issues, like, for example, only doing color contrast. But the Wave tool picks up a range of common issues like lack of alt text, as well as the lack of poor color contrast. It's a browser extension, so you can bolt it onto Chrome, and then all you need to do when you're on a page is right-click and go Wave this page, and up pops this box. Hopefully, like this one on the left, it says there's no errors, but if there are errors and you press the View Details button, it'll tell you what the errors are, and it'll show you on the page where the problems are. So you can see here is a web page which Wave hasn't found any errors, so it puts these little markers on the web page, and if you click on the errors, it'll show you where the color contrast errors are, for example, such as if the title doesn't have sufficient contrast to the background. So a very useful tool, most importantly, a free tool. So there's no reason not to use it if you're developing websites. In summary then, accessibility allows websites to be used by everybody, including those with disabilities, as best we can, really. There are several disabilities which are commonly acknowledged as requiring consideration, like dyslexia and color blindness. The features of accessibility commonly include alternate text, clear color contrast, and there's other things as well, as we've described. W3C, as part of WII, has developed these guidelines, the WCAG. They're still in development, so it's an ongoing project. And the WCAG has 4 sets of principles given by the PAW attribute: perceivable, operable, understandable, robust. So you can see what's there, you know how to use it, you know what it does, and hopefully you won't get any errors. Accessibility can be achieved partly by using modern semantic HTML elements such as track and header, but it's also the use of specific tags such as alt to put the alternate text for the blind, for the screen readers, and relative units to help us implement the variable font size. Why should you make things accessible other than just being nice? There are legal and business cases for it. You widen the reach to disabled people and you avoid discrimination, legal action. Adhering to standards can help accessibility, but it's not the same concept. And similarly, some accessibility improvements, such as clear layout, can help the general usability for non-disabled people. And you can test accessibility via evaluation tools such as Wave, which again is easy to use, very simple, free tool. Doesn't pick up everything, but it's a good start, and you can make the improvements, learn how to make the improvements, and then reapply the Wave, and it'll tell you whether or not you fix them. And we've covered, we've explained what a HTML element and tag is here. You can learn more about this in many other places on the web, and then you can then use your tools to evaluate the accessibility of the HTML that you've produced. There's a good quote here from Tim Berners-Lee, the founder of the World Wide Web. The power of the web is in its universality. Access by everyone regardless of disability is an essential aspect. So the idea is here that we want nobody to be excluded from using the web simply because of their disability. So accessibility is about making all these reasonable adjustments so that people are not left out of using the web, which is becoming a more and more important aspect of our lives. So these are the references then if you want to follow up any of this. then you can pause this, copy down, and look up some of these locations, or just Google up some of these terms. For example, under the Utah State University heading, you have the WAVE, accessibility evaluation tools. So I hope that that's helped you to understand why accessibility is important for disabled people, and why it should be important for anybody who owns or develops a website. And thank you very much for listening.